Tonight, we step back into the 19th century, an age of gaslight and factories, of lace curtains and coal smoke, of belief in progress and of fear of spirits. It is the Victorian era, an age often remembered through novels, through portraits, through the stiff poses of men in frock coats and women in high collars. But behind the polished photographs and the proud photodes, life was not so simple. It was an age of contradictions, of immense wealth and crushing poverty, of strict morals and hidden desires, of dazzling scientific discovery and stubborn superstition. In this journey, we will wander through the back alleys and the drawing rooms. We will sit in the parlors where families tried to summon the dead. We will walk the halls of country estates where bells rang for silent servants. And we will spend time with the men and women whose names you know, and those whose names were never written. This is not the history of battles or laws. This is the history of daily life, of how it felt to breathe, to eat, to hope, to despair. The quiet history that lingers like cold dust in the air. Settle in. Imagine yourself in the flicker of a gas lamp. The streets outside are dark and damp. A carriage rattles past. Somewhere in the distance, a factory whistle shrieks into the night. We begin not with lords or ladies, but with the smallest and most fragile members of society, the children who were sent into chimneys. Segment 1. Why it sucked to be a chimney sweep. Imagine that you are 8 years old. Your hands are small. Your body is thin. Your world is not one of toys or schoolbooks, but of soot and smoke. It is dawn in a Victorian city. The air smells of coal already, for fires never truly die in these towns. Your master, the sweep who owns you, shakes you awake. You rise quickly, for hesitation earns punishment. There is no breakfast waiting. At most, a crust of bread, already stale. Your clothing is thin, little more than rags. But it is enough, because you are not meant to be comfortable. You are meant to be small, to fit where grown men cannot. The streets are still quiet, though the first carts creaked by, carrying milk or coal. Your master leads you to a tall house, narrow, with many flues winding up from the fireplaces within. The owners are wealthy, and so the chimneys are many and narrow. Your job is simple, though it feels impossible. You must climb. To climb, the chimney mouth yawns black before you. You kneel, grip your brush, and begin to wriggle upward. It is a tunnel of soot. The brick is cold and rough against your bare knees and elbows. The air is already thick, stifling. There is no light. Above you, only blackness. Your body twists and squeezes. You push with your feet, brace with your hands. The soot falls into your eyes, into your mouth. You cough, but there is nowhere for the sound to go. It is swallowed by the chimney. Sometimes the passage narrows. You flatten yourself as much as you can. You pray that your shoulders will fit. If you are stuck, there is panic. A child could suffocate here, lost in the dark, never to emerge. But you keep moving, because the master below will not accept failure. At last, your brush scrapes loose the hardened soot. It tumbles down, coating you further. You push upward, inch by inch, until finally a faint circle of grey appears above the sky. the roof, air. You emerge like a shadow, covered head to toe in soot. Your lungs burn, your skin itches. But there is no time to rest. The soot must be collected. The next chimney awaits, the daily round. This routine repeats again and again. Dozens of chimneys, one after the other. The wealthy houses are full of fireplaces. Each one must be kept clear, for smoke that cannot rise will choke a room. You are paid almost nothing. In truth, the money goes to your master, not to you. Sometimes you are apprenticed, which is another way of saying sold, by poor parents who could not feed you. Other times you are an orphan with no choice at all. The streets are not kind. Passers-by look at you with a mix of pity and disgust. You reek of smoke and ash. Your skin is stained, your hair matted. Other children play in the alleys, but you are too tired to join them. Your game is survival. The hidden dangers, the soot, never leaves you. It clings to your lungs, to your skin. It settles in your eyes. Over time, it brings illness, coughing, wheezing, strange growths on the skin. It is slow, but certain. You feel it even now, though you are young. The constant cough, the ache in your chest, the sting in your eyes that never fades. Accidents, too, are common. A slip in the flue, a sudden fall, and a child might tumble down, bones broken. Sometimes the fire was not fully extinguished. Sometimes smoke still lingers. To climb a chimney is to gamble with your life every day. A rare rest at the end of the day. When the chimneys are finished, you return to the master's small lodging. The air is thick with soot here as well, for it clings to everyone, everything. You curl into your corner, exhausted. Your stomach rumbles, but the food is thin. The bed is nothing but straw, scratchy and dirty. And yet, as your eyes close, you dream of fresh air, of fields beyond the city, of being clean just once. It is only a dream. Tomorrow, the master will wake you before dawn, and you will crawl into another chimney. This was the life of a chimney sweep in Victorian England. Short, dangerous, and filled with soot. A childhood sacrificed for fire and warmth. Transition, and while children like these clung to survival in the cities, others, in country estates and quiet studies, lived entirely different lives. One of them was a man whose name you know, a man who forever changed the way we see the world. But his life, too, was not without hardship. In the next part of our story, we step into the home of Charles Darwin. Imagine, for a moment, that you are walking along a quiet English lane in the middle of the 19th century. The hedgerows are thick with greenery. Birdsong filters gently through the air. And just beyond the trees stands a large but modest country home. Down House, the home of Charles Darwin. It is here, away from the bustle of London and the clamour of politics, that Darwin lived for decades. And it is here that his great work slowly unfolded. But his story is not one of constant triumph or ease. It is a story of fragility, of illness, of grief, and of extraordinary patience. Darwin's early path. Charles Darwin was born in 1809 into a comfortable family. His father was a wealthy doctor. His mother came from the Wedgwood family, known for their fine pottery. He grew up surrounded by books, gardens, and a sense of curiosity. As a boy, Darwin loved collecting beetles, shells, stones. He filled boxes with small treasures, each one examined with fascination. He was not an excellent student at first. At Edinburgh, he studied medicine, but fainted at the sight of surgery. At Cambridge, he studied theology, preparing perhaps for a life as a clergyman. But it was not sermons that held his attention. It was the natural world. He wandered fields, peered at insects, pressed plants into books. The quiet details of life, not the pulpit, were his true calling. The voyage of the Beagle at 22, Darwin embarked on a journey that would shape the rest of his life. In 1831, he joined the ship HMS Beagle as a naturalist. The voyage lasted 5 years, circling the globe. The conditions were harsh: cramped quarters, seasickness, endless months at sea. But for Darwin, the world unfolded in dazzling variety. Pei explored the coasts of South America, collecting fossils of giant sloths and armadillos. He marveled at the strange creatures of the Galapagos Islands, finches with different beaks, tortoises with different shells, each adapted to its own island. He filled notebooks with observations. He collected thousands of specimens. Everywhere he looked, he saw variation, adaptation, change. Though he did not yet name it, the seeds of his theory were already germinating. But the voyage also left scars. Darwin's health, never robust, began to falter. He suffered violent seasickness. He caught fevers in South America that would haunt him for the rest of his life. By the time he returned to England in 1836, he carried not only boxes of fossils and plants, but also a body already marked by chronic illness. Life at Down House after his marriage to Emma Wedgwood. Darwin settled at Down House in Kent. The house was not ostentatious, but it became the quiet center of his world. Here he would live, think, and work for the next 40 years. Darwin's days followed a strict routine. He rose early, around 7, and began with a simple breakfast. Then, while his mind was still sharp, he retreated to his study. There, amid stacks of books, jars of specimens, and endless pages of notes, he worked. The mornings were precious. He could manage a few hours of concentrated thought before illness forced him to rest. After writing, he walked outside. Behind the house lay his favorite path, the Sutton Walk. It circled a small grove of trees. Darwin would pace it again and again, sometimes with a stick in hand, tapping the ground as he thought. Neighbors sometimes called it his thinking path. As he walked, ideas arranged themselves in his mind, slowly, patiently. At midday, he returned to his family for lunch. The afternoons were often interrupted by illness, stomach cramps, headaches, nausea. He would lie down, sometimes for hours, unable to move. Yet when he could, he returned to small, simple experiments. He studied how seeds floated in water, how worms enriched the soil, how pigeons bred into varieties. Evenings were quiet. Emma read aloud. The children played, Darwin might write letters from his armchair, always surrounded by papers, and then early to bed, in hopes that tomorrow his strength might return. The burden of illness, Darwin's health, shaped everything. From his 30s onward, he was never truly well. His symptoms were varied and mysterious: constant nausea, exhaustion, trembling hands, palpitations of the heart, eczema, and stomach distress. Doctors could not explain it. Some believed he had caught a tropical illness on the Beagle voyage. Others thought it was psychosomatic, the product of stress and nerves. Modern historians suggest possibilities ranging from Crohn's disease to Chagas disease. Whatever the cause, Darwin lived with pain and limitation. He measured his energy carefully. Each day was rationed between work and rest. He avoided London whenever possible, preferring the calm of the countryside. The weight of his illness was always with him, a reminder that even as his mind soared, his body remained fragile. Family, joy, and grief. Darwin's marriage to Emma was loving, though not without tension. Emma was deeply religious. Darwin, as his ideas grew, doubted. He feared that his conclusions about nature and evolution might wound her faith. In letters and conversations, he tried to soften the conflict, but it remained a quiet sorrow between them. Together, they had 10 children. The house was often filled with laughter and games. Darwin adored his children. He observed them carefully, noting their growth, their play, even their tantrums, all with a naturalist's eye. But tragedy struck. Several of the children died young, as was common in Victorian times. The loss that marked Darwin most deeply was that of his daughter Annie. She was bright, affectionate, and only 10 years old when illness claimed her. Darwin was devastated. He wrote of her with sorrow that never faded. Her death, more than anything, shook his fragile religious faith. He saw in her passing not divine will, but the indifferent cruelty of nature. The memory of Annie lingered with him for the rest of his life. The long gestation of a theory, Darwin's great work, did not arrive in a flash. It took decades. He filled notebook after notebook with observations. He studied barnacles for years, dissecting countless specimens to understand their tiny variations. He bred pigeons, noting how selective mating produced striking differences in beak, feather, and form. He grew plants, tested seeds, and even observed the humble earthworm with tireless patience. The idea of natural selection grew slowly, layer by layer, like sediment forming rock. Darwin was cautious. He knew his conclusions would be controversial. To say that species changed, that humans were not apart from animals, but part of the same grand tree of life, was to challenge not just science, but religion, tradition, and society itself. So he hesitated. He delayed publishing for years, even decades. Only when another naturalist, Alfred Russel Wallace, independently reached similar conclusions, did Darwin finally move to share his life's work. In 1859, On the Origin of Species was published. The book sold out on its first day. It was calm in tone, filled with careful evidence, but its implications were immense. Public reaction and private retreat. The world reacted with astonishment. Some praised Darwin as a genius. Others condemned him as dangerous. Cartoons mocked him, portraying humans with ape features. Debates raged in churches, in universities, in drawing rooms. Darwin himself avoided the spotlight. He did not enjoy confrontation. He rarely attended public lectures or debates. Instead, he remained at Down House, reading the letters that arrived by the hundreds, adding more notes to his files, and quietly continuing his experiments. The quiet years, as the years passed, Darwin grew older, but his routine remained steady. He rose early. He walked the sandwalk, step after step, day after day. He tended his gardens, watched his children, and filled his notebooks. He wrote more books on orchids, on climbing plants, on worms. Even in his final years, his curiosity never faded. The small details of life still fascinated him. The quiet work of worms, he believed, had shaped the very landscape of England, turning stone into soil, ruin into meadow. When he died in 1882, the nation mourned him as one of its greatest minds. Though he had lived quietly, his ideas had changed forever the way humanity understood itself. Darwin remembered. To remember Darwin is to remember a man of paradox, a thinker of immense boldness, living in a body of fragility, a genius who carried grief in his heart, a revolutionary who preferred silence to speeches. His despair was slow, not dramatic. It was the despair of long illness, of daily limitation, of quiet mourning. But from that slow despair grew a vision vast enough to embrace all of life. And so, in the quiet lanes of Down House, among the pilgrims, the plants, and the endless walks, Charles Darwin transformed not only his own sorrow, but the very way humanity sees the natural world. Transition. And while Darwin wrestled with the mysteries of life through science, others in Victorian England turned to different methods. They dimmed the lights, drew the curtains, and gathered round tables in hushed anticipation. They sought not fossils or finches, but voices from the beyond. In the next part of our journey, we enter the strange and solemn world of Victorian séance. It is evening in Victorian England. The lamps are dimmed. The heavy curtains are drawn against the smoky night air of London. You are seated in a parlour, on a stiff-backed chair, upholstered in dark velvet. Around you, a circle of men and women are arranged in silence. A table sits at the center, polished, with a single candle casting shadows on the wallpaper. Hands reach out, fingers lightly touching, completing the circle. The medium, often a pale, intense-looking young woman, or sometimes a gentleman of peculiar reputation, takes a deep breath. The atmosphere is expectant, hushed, and almost reverent. You are about to participate in a séance, one of the most curious and widespread obsessions of the Victorian age. Why the Victorians needed ghosts. The 19th century was an era of contradictions. It was the age of steam engines, telegraphs, and Darwin's theories. Science was advancing at a dizzying pace. Trains carried passengers across the countryside faster than ever imagined. Electric light began to flicker into homes. The world felt full of new possibilities. And yet, the Victorians lived in constant proximity to death. Diseases struck quickly and often fatally. Cholera swept through cities. Tuberculosis consumed young lives. Child mortality remained high. Families buried infants, children, and parents with aching regularity. For those who had lost loved ones, the grief was overwhelming. Religion offered comfort, but not certainty. The old faith seemed to clash with modern science. Was there truly life after death? And if so, could one speak to the departed? It was in this climate of grief, doubt, and curiosity that the séance craze was born. The origins, the Fox sisters, the movement began in America in the 1840s, in a farmhouse in New York State. Two young sisters, Margaret and Kate Fox, claimed that they could hear mysterious rappings on the walls and furniture. They said the sounds were communications from spirits. They devised a simple code: 1 rap for yes, 2 raps for no. Neighbors gathered. The story spread. Soon the Fox sisters were demonstrating their ability to audiences. They asked questions. The spirits answered in knocks and taps. People were astonished. Word traveled quickly across the Atlantic. By the 1850s, London parlors were abuzz with talk of spirit rappings. Newspapers reported on strange gatherings. Curious Victorians, always hungry for novelty, began hosting séances of their own. Inside the Victorian séance, a séance was not a casual affair. It was conducted with ritual, formality, and patience. The guests, usually family, friends, or invited skeptics, would sit around a table. The room was darkened to heighten the sense of mystery. Hands were joined, forming an unbroken chain. The medium often began with prayer or with soft words inviting the spirits to join. Then came the phenomena: table turning. The table would tremble, tilt, and sometimes rise from the floor. Participants swore they felt no force. The movement seemed to come from nowhere. Spirit raps, sharp knocks, echoed in the room, sometimes in answer to questions. Automatic writing. A medium might scribble furiously, claiming the words were dictated by a ghost. Materializations in more elaborate séances. A spirit was said to appear in the dim light, draped in white gauze or shrouds. Spirit photography. Later in the century, photographers promised to capture faint images of the dead, hovering beside the living. The experience was deeply emotional. Tears were common. Mothers asked to hear from lost children. Widows longed for words from their husbands. Some sought comfort, others simple proof that death was not the end. The respectable obsession, unlike earlier traditions of witchcraft or fortune-telling, spiritualism became surprisingly respectable. Wealthy ladies invited mediums into their drawing rooms. Gentlemen of science attended out of curiosity. Even Queen Victoria herself, mourning the death of Prince Albert, is said to have attended public halls were rented for grand demonstrations. Mediums traveled and performed before large crowds. Pamphlets and books on spiritualism circulated widely. A séance could be both entertainment and consolation, a blend of theater, religion, and science. Skeptics and investigators, but not everyone believed. From the beginning, skeptics suspected fraud. Many séances were exposed as clever tricks. Mediums used hidden wires to tilt tables. They cracked joints in their toes to create mysterious raps. They used glowing paint, hidden assistants, or secret compartments. Some investigators made it their mission to test mediums. Scientists, clergymen, and magicians attended séances, sometimes unannounced, to catch deceptions. Yet even when fraud was proven, the fascination continued. For many Victorians, the desire to believe was stronger than doubt. The line between true faith and eager deception was blurry. Even when convinced of trickery, some participants still felt they had glimpsed something beyond the material world. Science meets the supernatural. Curiously, spiritualism was not always in opposition to science. In an age of telegraphs and invisible forces, the idea of unseen spirit energy seemed plausible to many. If messages could travel through wires, why not across the veil between life and death? If photography could capture what the eye could not see, perhaps it might also capture a ghost. Electricity itself was invisible, yet its effects undeniable. The Victorians lived in a world where the unseen was constantly being revealed. Why not souls? This blending of science and spiritualism made séances feel modern, not medieval. They were not whispers of witchcraft, but experiments in communication. Famous mediums. The century produced many famous mediums. Some became household names. Daniel Douglas Home, a Scottish medium, was famed for levitations. Guests claimed they saw him float out of a window and back in through another. Florence Cook produced the spirit Katie King, who appeared in flowing robes. Skeptics argued it was Florence herself in disguise, but believers were convinced. William Crookes, a respected scientist, investigated Cook and declared her genuine, though later critics doubted his impartiality. Mediums could become celebrities, courted by the wealthy and written about in newspapers. The séance table was as much a stage as any theater. The comfort of ritual despite frauds and controversies. Séances served a deep psychological need. They provided a structure for grief. In a society where mourning was heavily ritualized, with black clothing, strict etiquette, and extended periods of seclusion, the séance offered a sense of ongoing connection. Instead of final silence, there was dialogue. Instead of absence, there was presence. Even if the table raps were tricks, even if the voices were staged, the comfort was real. And perhaps, for the grieving, that was enough. The decline. By the end of the 19th century, the craze began to fade. Exposure of fraudulent mediums weakened public trust. New scientific discoveries explained away many supposed phenomena. The world moved forward into the 20th century, with telephones, radios, and soon motion pictures, new wonders to occupy the imagination. But spiritualism never entirely disappeared. Even today, séances are remembered in popular culture, in literature, in theatre. The Victorians left behind not just factories and railways, but also the strange memory of candlelit parlours where voices of the dead were sought. Closing reflection. To imagine the séance craze is to glimpse the Victorian soul, a soul caught between progress and tradition, between faith and science, between grief and hope. In their darkened parlors, they sought comfort where they could find it. Perhaps they were deceived. Perhaps they deceived themselves. But for a moment, in the flicker of candlelight, the dead seemed near again. And that nearness, whether real or imagined, was powerful enough to shape an entire culture. Transition, and while the middle classes gathered in candlelit parlors to seek whispers from the dead, another world existed just beyond their reach. Behind iron gates and sweeping lawns, life moved according to another rhythm. The rhythm of service, of hierarchy, of rigid formality. In our final segment, we step inside the Victorian manor house, where every bell summoned a servant, and every glance carried unspoken rules. Imagine approaching a great Victorian manor house. The drive is long, lined with tall oaks. At the end, a stately home rises from the mist, its stone walls pale against the grey sky. The windows are tall, the chimneys many, and smoke drifts upward from constant fires. The house is not merely a residence. It is a symbol of wealth, of power, of order. And within its walls lies a carefully choreographed life, a life of privilege above and of tireless labor below. Let us step inside. A day in the life of servants. The first to stir are the servants. Long before dawn, the house awakens from below. The servants' quarters, tucked away in the basement or attic, fill with quiet activity. The scullery maid, lowest of all, rises before the others. Her hands are already chapped from scrubbing, and she begins the day by blackening boots, cleaning yesterday's pots, and carrying buckets of water from the pump. The kitchen maids and cooks soon follow, lighting stoves, preparing breakfast not for themselves, but for the masters of the house. The smell of baking bread, of porridge, of roasting meats fills the underground air. The footmen dress with precision, their livery immaculate, hair neatly parted, ready to stand like statues in hallways, or carry trays without the faintest clatter. The butler inspects the silver, polishing until it gleams in the candlelight. His voice is measured, calm, and his authority absolute among the male servants. The housemaids creep silently through the bedrooms, dusting, sweeping, laying fires, all before the family awakes. If a maid is seen, she has failed. Her work must be invisible. By the time the master and mistress descend for breakfast, the household machine is already in full motion, every cog turning unseen. The masters awake upstairs. Life moves at a slower pace. The lady of the house is assisted by her lady's maid, who helps her dress layer upon layer, corset, petticoats, bodice, gown. Every ribbon is tied, every glove fitted, not by her own hands, but by another's. The master may meet with his valet, who lays out his clothes, brushes his coat, and ensures that not a speck of lint mars his appearance. Breakfast is served in the dining room. A footman stands behind each chair, ready to pour tea, to pass dishes, to retreat silently the moment he is not needed. Conversation is polite, measured. The children, if present, are often confined to nurseries with their governesses. The true rhythm of the household belongs to the adults, the patriarch, the matriarch, and the servants who sustain them. The language of bells in nearly every Victorian manor house. A system of bells hung on the walls of the servants' hall. Each bell was connected by a wire to a room above. When rung, the servants could tell which room required them. A bell for the drawing room, a bell for the library, a bell for the nursery. Each had its place, its sound, its urgency. The servants waited in readiness. The ring of a bell was not a suggestion, it was a command. To hesitate was unacceptable. To disobey was unthinkable. This silent system kept the upper and lower worlds apart. The family need never raise their voices. The servants need never intrude until summoned. The machinery of the house below stairs. Life was not elegant but efficient. The kitchen was hot and noisy, filled with clattering pots, the barking of the cook, and the constant preparation of meals that the family would eat with perfect composure. The pantries stored wines and cheeses, guarded by the butler. The laundry room steamed endlessly, with maids boiling, scrubbing, starching, and ironing mountains of linen. The servants' hall provided brief moments of respite, where they could eat plain meals quickly, always ready to spring back to duty. The contrast with the drawing rooms above, quiet, carpeted, refined, could not have been sharper. The drawing room for the family and their guests. The drawing room was the center of social life. Here, the lady might host afternoon tea, pouring into delicate porcelain cups, passing plates of sandwiches and cakes prepared by unseen hands. Conversations drifted politely, touching on politics, literature, gossip, never straying into discomfort. If music was desired, a daughter might play the piano, or a hired musician might be brought in. The atmosphere was one of order, of calm, of carefully maintained appearances. All the while, footmen stood silently, ready to remove plates, refill cups, yet never to speak unless spoken to. Night falls as evening drew near. The housemaids lit lamps, drew curtains, and prepared bedrooms. The master and mistress might host a dinner party, a grand occasion requiring dozens of dishes, fine wines, elaborate service. The meal might last hours, with courses appearing and vanishing in perfect rhythm. Pap cigars in the library for the men, and embroidery or reading aloud for the women. At last, the house quieted, but the servants' work did not end. Fires must be banked, dishes washed, clothes laid out for the morning. Only late into the night, in their cramped quarters, did the servants finally rest. A world of contrasts, the Victorian manor house was a world divided. For the family, comfort, elegance, leisure. For the servants, long hours, strict discipline, anonymity, and yet each depended upon the other. Without the servants, the house could not function. Without the family, the servants would have no livelihood. It was a delicate balance, sustained by tradition and reinforced by class. A reflection to walk through a Victorian manor house is to see two worlds at once. Above, the glitter of chandeliers, the shimmer of silk gowns, the calm rhythm of polite society. Below, the clatter of dishes, the sweat of labor, the endless turning of the hidden machine. Together, they formed the heart of Victorian life. A society obsessed with order, with ritual, with the strict separation of roles. And in that separation lay both beauty and closing now. As we leave the manor house, the bells fall silent. The footmen fade into the shadows. The drawing room empties, and the fires burn low. We have walked through soot-filled chimneys into the troubled mind of Darwin, through candlelit séances, and into the halls of the Victorian elite. Each layer of this world has revealed another face of Victorian life. And in our final conclusion, we will gently step back from this world, reflecting on what it means to us now, and allowing its echoes to fade into silence. And so, our long walk through Victorian England comes to an end. We have climbed the narrow chimneys with weary children. We have sat quietly with Charles Darwin as his mind wrestled with science and sorrow. We have held hands in darkened parlors, waiting for the dead to speak, and we have stood in the grand halls of the manor, house where silence and order governed every moment. Each glimpse has shown us not just how Victorians lived, but also how they endured, how they hoped, and how they tried to make sense of their world. It was a time of invention and of superstition, of strict manners and hidden grief, of progress rushing forward, and lives caught between tradition and change. The chimneys smoke. Think back to the chimney sweep, the small body pressed into narrow spaces, the smell of soot filling the lungs, the scrape of brick against skin. It was a life of hardship, of invisibility. Children worked so that others might sit in warm drawing rooms, unaware of the cost. Yet those children laughed when they could. They sang street songs. They found moments of light, even in a dark world. Their labor reminds us of the price of comfort and of how far we have come in protecting childhood today. The mind of Darwin, then, recalled Darwin, not the calm, bearded figure in textbooks, but the man of flesh and blood, racked by doubt, his stomach often in knots, his heart heavy with grief. He carried the weight of an idea that changed the world, and yet, at his desk in Down House, he was simply a father, a husband, a man searching for truth. His story reminds us that even the greatest minds are carried forward not by certainty, but by persistence, not by ease, but by endurance. The murmurs of spirits we sat to in the séance parlor, in the hush of velvet-draped rooms. We heard the knock of tables, the whispers of mediums, the tears of mothers reaching across the veil. Fraud and faith intermingled. Some were deceived, some deceived themselves, but all were searching for connection, for hope, for assurance that love does not end at death. Their candles have long since burned out, their whispers long faded, but the longing behind them is timeless. The manor house in silence, and we walked through the grand halls of the manor house. We watched the servants scurry unseen. We heard the faint chime of bells, each a command wrapped in sound. We saw the lady in silk, the butler in black, the footmen standing silent as statues. Above and below, two worlds coexisted, one of wealth and leisure, the other of toil and obedience. The house itself was a machine, a living organism of stone and wood, powered by the lives within it. Now, the halls stand quieter. Visitors wander, tour guides speak softly, and the old bells no longer ring. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear them still. The tapestry of Victorian life. Together these four glimpses weave a tapestry. Not a neat, perfect tapestry, but one of contrasts, of shadows and light. The Victorians lived with smog in their lungs and lace at their throats. They believed in both railways and spirits. They clung to manors even while grief weighed on them. They endured lives of labor and also lives of luxury. They were not so different from us, seeking comfort, seeking meaning, seeking to leave behind a mark in a world moving too quickly. The fade into rest, and now, as the images drift away, perhaps you feel the soot on your skin fade, the heaviness of Darwin's desk lift, the candles of the séance gutter and die, the great house empty and still. The Victorians recede into history, their footsteps soft against the cobblestones, their carriages rolling away into the mist. The gas lamps then fade to darkness. All that remains is the stillness, a deep quiet, a silence more restful than any séance could summon. Gentle reflection tonight. You may find comfort in knowing that you live in another age, one with central heating instead of sooty chimneys, one with antibiotics instead of constant fear of disease, one with freedom from rigid rituals and bells that summon. And yet the Victorians left something behind, their resilience, their curiosity, their insistence on finding beauty in a world of struggle. As you rest, perhaps you carry a fragment of that resilience with you, not as a burden, but as a quiet strength. Closing words, so let the past grow distant now. Let the soot and the smoke drift away. Let the parlour grow dark. Let the manor stand empty. The Victorians have returned to their world, and you remain in yours, safe, warm, surrounded by the stillness of night. Close your eyes. Let the rhythm of history settle into silence. Let sleep take you gently, like a carriage rolling softly along a quiet road. Good night. Good night.